It's that time once again. It's time for Talking the Bible with the Brandons. Featuring Brandon and Brandon. Or Laser or Blazer or something. The one who wants a mullet. Yeah, that one.
Here we are, Tuesday, and we are talking Bible with the Brandons and Spurgeon, of course. Here.
That's right. Don't forget Spurge.
Always here.
Spurge is he needs to be behind the Bible as though he's preaching from the Bible.
That's true. Because we're flipping, so.
Oh, he's in your way.
Yeah, Spurgeon is in my way. How's that sound rolling off the tongue?
Well, I just noticed I have my Band-Aid is unraveling here.
Man, you need to, trade that one in.
I drove a. It was bad.
That don't look good, man.
I drove the drill bit into my thumb.
This is why he asked for so much help with his little home projects, is because he's not very good with,
And it hurt. Tracy looked at it and said, "You probably needed a stitch for that." It was bad. So,
well, the good thing about having 10 fingers is if you lose one, you still got 9 others. A thumb maybe.
No, not if it's a thumb. I mean, that's.
He's gonna have to start gripping stuff like this.
That would be bad right there.
Yeah. All right, and I will look for opportunities to make jokes and say, "What do you think, Brandon? Thumbs up?" Or
Yes.
All right, hey guys, 1 Samuel chapter 19 through 20. Hope you guys read ahead, and if you did, you will see that there is a little bit of inner familial turmoil here with the likes of David. Saul's not a big fan. Jonathan, quite the opposite.
Yeah.
So, Brandon, why don't you kind of give us the summary here, the bird's eye view, 19 through 20 here.
David, is being promised the throne. Saul's been told he doesn't going to have the throne anymore. So what Saul is doing in all of this is trying to stop that from happening, which in many ways is kicking against God. It's pushing against God's purposes. God has said, the throne is no longer yours. I'm giving it to David. And Saul could have been like, okay, I blew it. Confess my sin. Your will be done. Hands the throne to David. But he's not going to do that. Saul's going to fight like crazy to keep his throne, and then wants to pass it on to Jonathan, although who knows if that's really even the main thing for Saul. It's just mostly just keeping the throne for himself. And so that leads him to do really, really terrible, bad things. He's crazy jealous of David.
Throws a spear at him.
Yes, crazy jealous of David and Jonathan's friendship, I think. Angry with Jonathan all the time because Jonathan loves David, which, made me think about, what did Jesus say when he came? He said, "Do not think I came to bring peace,
family,
but a sword to drive a father against his son,
mother against daughter." Yeah.
So, yes, you can see if your allegiance is to something, it can drive, and somebody else's isn't. It can definitely drive a wedge, and you're seeing that with this story. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We do. We see, Saul's kind of, you're seeing his true colors come out here. How Saul is always about Saul, and Jonathan, is certainly about David, but I think Jonathan's certainly about honoring the Lord as well.
Yeah.
What should we, how should we read? I know it's easy to kind of paint Saul as, this figure who we ought to not emulate in any way, and deservedly so. He doesn't do himself any favors. But then we see things like in verse 9, it says, "Then a harmful spirit from the Lord came upon Saul as he sat in the house with his spear in his hand, and David was playing the lyre. And Saul sought to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he eluded Saul so that he struck the spear at the wall, and David fled and escaped that night." You could read that and say, Saul was almost kind of, passive in that situation, that the Lord, sent this harmful spirit to kind of.
That's what I told my Tracy last night
Okay.
when I was all yelling at her and stuff.
That's right. God sent this
That's
harmful
right. I said, sweetheart, that I'm not responsible for this. It was a harmful spirit from the Lord. Now, it's what you're bringing up there is an interesting point. It's the same thing I think you see in the book of Exodus with Pharaoh,
Right.
and the Lord is hardening his heart. You will read in other places where the Bible says God sends a deceiving spirit to some prophets who were false prophets to tell a false prophecy to a particular king. But the point in the theme you will notice in all of those guys is that those guys owned it. They kind of earned that already with their lives and the way they were living and the things they were doing. So there was a sense in which God's not giving them anything they didn't actually want already.
Sure.
You know, but He's doing it. But part of that is you've got to make room in your belief structure, in your belief system, for God to do some really mysterious things that don't always that could shock you. Just to, that could be difficult to accept for His wise purposes, and this is one of those things. I don't think it's at all out of character for Saul, or God's forcing Saul to do something he doesn't want to do. He's maybe speeding the process up. He's doing it for whatever reason, but nonetheless, it's not something that God's doing that is sinful. God cannot sin.
Not the author of sin.
That's
here.
right.
Yeah, I mean, certainly still an act of volition, on Saul's part. Certainly, the thought of like pinning David to a wall probably brought him great pleasure, so.
Well, he intends to kill him on multiple occasions.
That's right, and we will continue to see that moving forward.
Yeah.
But today, for my HEAR acronym, instead of really focusing kind of on, Saul's, destructive relationship here with David, I really focused on Jonathan's relationship with David here, and particularly just the covenant that they make with one another. I mean, I think from our last reading, we saw that they had a great friendship. God kind of knit their souls together, and I just love. I love this little conversation. David knows he's kind of on the ropes. Jonathan knows that too. But yet, they're not going to keep King Saul from coming in between their friendship together. So it says right here in verse 14 in chapter 20, "If I am still alive, show me the steadfast love of the Lord that I may not die, and do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever, when the Lord cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth." And Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "May the Lord take vengeance on David's enemies." And Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. So quite a moment there between Jonathan and David. So my explanation, just Jonathan makes a covenant with David to be unified together for their steadfast love for one another and vengeance upon David's enemies, what it says there. So kind of almost like Ruth-esque, your God will be my God and your people will be my people. And for my application, I said this covenant only foreshadows a greater covenant that is also made through the line of David, Jesus Christ, where we're now unified and united with him forever, and his steadfast love will never leave us or forsake us. And just my response, Lord, help my soul to be bound to yours as Jonathan to David. May I love you with all that I am. So, that's kind of what really stood out to me on this one.
In some ways it mirrors the covenant really that brothers and sisters in Christ are making through a church. Churches used to sign a covenant. Members used to sign a covenant when they would join a church, and it was this very thing you see modeled here. It was a covenant being made between members of a church to say, we're going to complete this mission together, and I need you, you need me. If I get off the path, you pull me back on. If you get off the path, I'm going to pull you back on. It was meant to be just a way of watching over one another, and caring for one another and strengthening one another. Just that commitment. And it had a seriousness, a weight to it. I think sometimes we don't do that in our churches enough. We don't have covenants, or actually they're coming back. A lot of people do have covenants now, and they sign a covenant. But there was a weightiness to joining a church, and that was like, you're joining this church. this is a weighty thing.
Right.
You have expectations. We have expectations for you. You have, this is what we expect. And it's serious. It's not just like, oh, my name's on a roll. It's like, we're going to do this together, and you're going to push me, and I'm going to push you. And you open yourself up to that kind of accountability and that kind of commitment to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think we've kind of gotten away from that? Just kind of as a culture.
Well, it's because we're commitment phobes, period. Why has our culture gotten away from marriage? Why has our culture gotten away from – this is the same thing you see with a couple, couple that chooses not to get married, wants to live together, and may do the whole, why do we need a piece of paper to say that we love you? We are, in our culture, pulling out of all formalities. We're pushing against, which is really commitment, right? What we're really trying to say is, I don't want to really totally get into this, because once I'm really committed, it's harder to get out.
Right. Yeah.
So
I think I actually saw recently in an article that came out last week that marriage is at its lowest rate from last year than ever since the time that we've been recording it. It's lower than the Great Depression right now.
Yeah.
I mean,
I wouldn't be surprised. I perform. When I first got into ministry, I did a lot of weddings.
Yeah.
And I don't do hardly anymore.
Yeah.
You just don't see as much. People delay marriage. But a lot of this is just, it is the idea that I am just, if I sign that paper and I make that legal, there is suddenly a commitment.
Yeah.
And I can't get out of that commitment. And that, I think, is kind of the way it is with membership in a church. We like to come and go.
Like our individual autonomy.
We
don't
back out. We like to, if the feelings aren't in it anymore, we like to pull out, and so I think that's a lot of it. We just kind of push against the formal, that kind of structure, that kind of commitment.
Yeah. Well, so I think maybe a lesson we can take from all this is, let's push into the commitment. Let's not shy away from the commitment here, especially with the people of God here. And if you do so, I mean, you see, what wonderful blessings can really come from that. My best relationships that I have, my best friendships that I have are between, Christian brothers, that I have. And, I know that it looks like Brandon and I, we hate each other like most days, but, every once in a while, we get along. So, but yeah, I mean, it is. It's such a blessing, just to be committed to one another, because the nature of a Christian relationship is, it transcends an earthly one, because as long as Brandon doesn't, continue to stray, and listen to this godless music he likes listening to, we're going to be spending eternity together, forever. And that's far more than what I could say for maybe someone.
Are you saying like Willie Nelson is godless?
Ew, yeah.
He's got a whole album about the redheaded stranger, the redheaded preacher.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, well, he ended up shooting several people and killing them.
Yeah, and I know Willie Nelson has an affinity for certain illegal substances as well. So I'm not one to judge here, but yeah. That's know a tree by its fruit.
That's true.
Well, all right, guys. That's all the time we've got for today. Once again, not going to have to travel too far here. We're really in the meat of 1 Samuel. So 1 Samuel 21 through 22. Make sure you guys read ahead for that, and we'll break it down a little bit tomorrow. We'll see y'all then.